Welcome back. I'd like to finish up my comments right before you get a chance to listen to Sherburne. I left off last time with Tunebooks for teachers, and we talked about the books that were the repertory of hymns and plain tunes and anthems and the set pieces all put in those tune books for teachers. Now I'd like to move on and talk to you about the popularity of singing books. And we'll start with I know what I like and I like what I know. So despite the popularity of the singing books and these routine pleas for better music making from the dozens of ministers and other people, there remained a lot of resistance to the regular singing. The Puritan clergyman Cotton Mather noted that the proponents of the usual way, or the old way, lived for the most part in smaller towns and rural areas. He cited their chief objection that when some people in a church develop better musical literacy, those singers often wanted to form a separate choir, which ran against the Calvinist belief that singing should involve the entire congregation. In regular singing, the tempos were quicker, which led many people to disparage them as sounding too secular, calling these melodies song tunes and tunes to dance to. In fact, adherents of the usual way compared the singing of the newer, more complex tunes to worshiping the devil. If they heard such a piece starting up, Mather added that they would run out of the meeting and at the beginning of the singing. Moreover, many performers of the usual way clearly relished the unified congregational effort that took place during lining out. As historian Richard Crawford notes, anecdotes such as describing the singers who vocalized together that brought about a sense of muscularity. They would, quote, plow a field or pull up a tree stump. The clear feeling of community, regardless of the fact that the singing was less sophisticated with the by-ear approach, helps to explain why the usual way persisted in some regions well into the 20th century and then into the 21st century. Even with pockets of resistance from the usual way congregation, the enthusiasm for singing schools and regular singing meant there was a steady market for new tune books. Moreover, there was a demand for increasingly difficult music. This thirst opened the door to new genres such as the anthem and especially the fuguing tune. This type of song incorporated imitative polyphony, a texture unknown previously in the colonial sacred music of the Calvinist churches. The word resembles the term fugue, made famous in Europe by Baroque composers such as Johann Sebastian Bach, but American composers generally spelled it F-U-G-E with only one U. As Sherburne, our first listening example, will demonstrate, the construction of a colonial fuguing tune differs significantly from the structure of the European genre. Music scholars use the term genre here to label various categories of musical composition, such as songs and psalms, plain tunes, and so forth. For this reason, scholars today disagree on the pronunciation of fuging. Most advocate for fuging, but some argue for fudging. Made in America, James Lyon, 1761, Tunebook Urania, was the first American publication to include fuguing tunes. But, like the earliest psalm tunes, the genre actually had originated overseas, and thus Lyon's examples were imports. The British had established the genre's basic two-section structure. A typical fuguing tune began homophonically, using a sacred text set to four-voice harmonization, with the melody carried in the tenor voice. This opening homophonic portion was referred to as the plain tune, which was followed by the second half's fugue, when the texture switched to polyphony. In the hands of colonial composers, the American fuguing tune began to take on some new characteristics. The rhythms and the harmonies often became simpler than their British counterparts, with the melodies becoming more angular and in some ways stronger in general effect. Certainly, William Billings found the impact of fuguing to be rapturous. He proclaimed in 1778, "There is more variety in one piece of fuguing music than in 20 pieces of plain song. The audience are most luxuriously entertained and exceedingly delighted. In the meantime, their minds are surprisingly agitated and extremely fluctuated. Now the solemn bass demands their attention. Now the manly tenor, now the lofty counter, now the volatile treble, now here, now there, now here again. Oh, enchanting, oh, ecstatic. Push on, ye sons of harmony." Billings included 10 fuguing tunes in his second tune book, The Singing Master's Assistant, in 1778. While many other colonial composers also explored the new genre in an outpouring of new tune books. Posterity has given various nicknames to this wave of American composers in the last 30 years of the 18th century, calling them Yankee tunesmiths or the First New England School. Similar to Billings, other members maintained day jobs in addition to their compositional efforts. Which brings us to Daniel Reed, 1757 to 1836, a storekeeper and publisher, as well as the composer of the fuguing tune, Sherburne. Listening example 1. Daniel Reed was a prolific contributor to the First New England School's overall output, composing more than 400 tunes, although only a quarter of that number were published in his lifetime. He was born quite poor, laboring as a farm worker in Massachusetts before the Revolutionary War. Reed served in the Continental Army as a private in 1777 and 1778. After leaving the Army, before the Revolutionary War had ended, he relocated to New Haven, Connecticut, where he started a partnership with an engraver to run a publishing business. By issuing the American Music magazine in 1786, they became the first published musical periodical in America. In addition to the publishing firm, Reed ran a general store, crafted combs out of horn and ivory, and also led a singing school. Reed's biography has aspects of a rags to riches story. After settling in New Haven, he began to woo Jerusha Sherman. He rapidly discovered that her father would not consent to her marriage with me because, quote, I was guilty of the unpardonable crime of poverty. Nevertheless, Reed persevered, and as his business prospered, so did his courtship. He married Jerusha around 1785, and they named one of their 4 children George Friedrich Handel Reed, saluting the Baroque composer 1685-1759, who was a direct contemporary of Bach. And I can see that question now on one of your tests. So that is George Friedrich Handel Reed. In addition to his marriage, another achievement for Reed in 1785 was the publication of the American Singing Book, or a new and easy guide to the art of psalmody, designed for the use of singing schools in America. Reed thereby became the second American composer after Billings to produce a volume containing new compositions by solely one person. He did very well with the American Singing Book. It was issued with supplements 5 times over the next decade. And he also succeeded with an even larger tune book, the Columbian Harmonist, although much of that music was borrowed from earlier sources. Several of the individual selections within the American Singing Book grew to be extremely popular, especially a Christmas-themed tune titled Sherburne. So go on to the next section for a discussion of listening example 1, Sherburne by Daniel Reed. And thank you for tuning in. I'll talk to you soon.